Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So this is my trusty 2002 DRZ 400S that I've had since 2006, and I wanted to show you this rack that I have on the back and how I mount a chainsaw on it. When I bought this rack back in, I think 2006, the name of the company was Pro Moto Billet, and they called this the Racket. I bought this primarily to carry a little bit of gear back there, but also this company makes a adapter plate that lets you carry a chainsaw back here. So I bought that chainsaw plate at the same time that I bought the rack. And that chainsaw plate is easily removable. Plate sits up on top, and then there's two little flat bars about that wide, and they don't span the entire width of the rack. They're just part way across. But then they go underneath the rack, and you thread screws through the top, and then the little bar on the bottom is threaded. But it's a super nice rack. It mounts where the seat bolts are on the DRZ 400. It's got two little spacers back here, one on each side, and then it included longer screws. If you're going to mount this on a DRZ 400, I would highly recommend periodically put some Loctite on those screws. I've actually had these screws loosen up and fall out and go missing on the trail. I think I've lost one or two spacers as well. And it also mounts to the factory rear subframe. There's two spacers underneath here, one for each screw. That's where those screws come down through the subframe cross member at. Looking at the dimensions of the rack, front to back, we are at 11 inches. And then taking a look at the width, we are just a little bit over 8 3/4. I store the chainsaw plate in this little box. I don't use the plate except when I'm going to carry a chainsaw. And then after I'm done, don't need the saw plate or need to carry the saw anymore for the riding season, I take the saw plate off. It's got a little piece of Delrin to insert into the plate, and that's where your bar goes, and then the Delrin is there to keep the chain from digging into the aluminum. So it comes with a bunch of different screw holes and 2 bars, and then I'm using 4 screws to mount it. And over the years I've adjusted the positioning of it, and then at some point, well, 2008, I took this photo so that when I mounted it again I knew exactly where to put it. Because the trick is getting the screws in the right place. Actually, I must be missing 2 screws because I've got 6 screws here. You don't want your screws hitting any of these cross pieces of the rack. So that was why I took a picture. It looks like I've actually got several photos here. But then we also have 2 rubber pads. The rack only came, or the saw plate only came with 1 rubber pad, but I needed 2, so I ordered a second one to get my saw just a little bit higher off the rack. Otherwise, something on the saw was trying to dig into the rack or dig into the little Delrin plate. Looking at the plate here, you can see that I've got marks where I used the screws at. So let's get these screws unthreaded and drop them on the floor. So the rack, or the saw plate, mounts so that the bar is over on the sprocket side of the motorcycle. And I have also drawn lines on the rack itself, but those lines have vanished. It's been actually probably about 5 or 6 years since I've last carried the saw on the bike. The reason I carry a saw is I used to do a bunch of trail maintenance and trail clearing for a big dual sport event. It used to take place every year in central Washington, and I haven't done that event in a few years. That was actually why I bought this chainsaw that I carry on the rack is primarily for doing that trail clearing. So getting the rack positioned initially isn't super critical because, as you can see, it tends to move around a little bit as I'm mounting the bar on the bottom. And the chainsaw that I carry is a Stihl MS250. So I got all the screws in and I've kind of wiggled the rack around just a little bit to get it in final position. I just don't want any of the screws digging into the cross braces on the rack. I always keep this Allen wrench in with the rack or the saw plate in that box that I showed you earlier. That way if I happen to be out camping or whatever, I can pull this rack off, or the saw plate. I keep calling it a rack when it's the saw plate. There are other style chainsaw mounts that are primarily meant for little saws, like that top handle saw that I showed you earlier, that mount to the front forks of the bike. A lot of bikes, especially more serious off-road bikes as opposed to this dual sport bike, they don't have a very significant subframe, so they're really not meant to haul much weight or any weight at all on the back. This DRZ has a big aluminum subframe. So now we'll go ahead and get the rubber pad mounted, and then there are separate holes for the screws for the saw plate. And these are all threaded, so we have 4 across the front, 4 across the back. This piece of black Delrin was cut specifically for this McCullough bar guard. And then the chainsaw just drops right down in like that. It does tend to rock back and forth, but once I strap it down with a couple of little nylon tie straps, then it's pretty much rock solid. Probably I should get a little bag with a drawstring around the bottom to put over the top of the saw. I do so much riding in really dusty conditions that dust getting attracted to all the bar oil on this side of the saw can wreak havoc on my chain and the bar and everything. My technique for strapping the saw down is to wrap one little nylon strap through here and then bring it up over the bar here, and that kind of holds it back. And then I take another nylon strap. I think, if I remember right, I wrap it either through here or maybe through here, and then up through the hand grip area, and then down the other side, and then over here, or maybe under this cross brace. And I just cinch it down, and then it pretty much is really solid. I've had the rack for 15 years now, and it's really served me well for carrying a little bag with tools and whatnot, as well as carrying the chainsaw. I do tend to ride a little bit less aggressive when I'm carrying the saw on the back, so I don't overstress the subframe. There was a time where I actually did break one of my subframes and I replaced it.